The electromagnetic storms of the Orion Nebula churned like a cosmic maelstrom, casting brilliant azure and violet tendrils across the void of space. The Centaurian research vessel Cosmic Probe moved with calculated precision, its quantum sensors prodding the chaotic energy fields that most spacefaring civilizations would have avoided entirely. Dr. Emma Rodriguez leaned forward, her four-fingered hand hovering over the holographic display. Unlike many of her colleagues, she possessed an almost heretical curiosity that often bordered on recklessness. Where others saw danger, she saw opportunity. The nebula's violent energy patterns were more than just random electromagnetic disruptions. They were a complex language waiting to be deciphered. Anomalous energy signature, she muttered, her translation implant converting her native Centaurian speech into the ship's standard communication protocol. The holographic display flickered, revealing a series of quantum fluctuations that defied standard computational models. Her assistant, junior researcher Vextor, shifted nervously. His translucent exoskeleton rippled with anxiety, a biological tell that humans would have recognized as pure nervousness. Dr. Rodriguez, the radiation levels are approaching critical threshold. Our sensors are detecting multiple quantum interference patterns that should be impossible. Emma ignored him, her eyes, remarkable for a Centaurian, with their ability to perceive a wider spectrum of electromagnetic radiation, locked onto a particular data stream. Something was out there. Something old. Something that didn't belong in this region of space. Adjust lateral quantum resonance, she commanded. I want a full spectrum analysis of that distortion. The ship's artificial intelligence, a complex quantum neural network that bordered on sentience, complied. Massive energy collectors extended from the Cosmic Probe's hull, creating a delicate web of quantum entanglement that could map even the most minute variations in space-time. What emerged on the display was something that made even the most seasoned researchers pause. A perfectly geometric disruption. Not random. Not natural. Something deliberate. There, Emma whispered. Do you see it? Vextor's sensory tendrils quivered. It's impossible. The quantum signature suggests a technology that predates our current galactic civilization by at least 3 evolutionary cycles. The object began to take shape on their sensors. Not a natural formation. Not a standard piece of space debris, but something else entirely. A vessel. No, more precisely, a container. Emergency protocols should have been initiated. Standard xenorchaeological procedures dictated extreme caution when encountering unknown technological artifacts. But Emma Rodriguez was not a researcher who followed standard procedures. Prepare retrieval protocols, she said, her voice calm and measured. Vextor's exoskeleton went rigid. Director Rodriguez, that would violate at least 17 interstellar research guidelines. The quantum radiation alone will be managed, she interrupted. This is why we're out here. Not to follow guidelines, but to discover. The Cosmic Probe extended its quantum retrieval arms, massive technological appendages that could manipulate matter at the subatomic level. They moved with a precision that seemed almost organic, approaching the mysterious object with a delicacy that belied their immense power. What emerged from the nebula's swirling energy was a marvel of preservation. A cryosleep pod that looked simultaneously ancient and impossibly advanced. Its exterior was scarred by centuries of interstellar travel, marked with micro-impacts and radiation burns, but its core structure remained intact, protected by technologies that the Centaurian researchers had never encountered. Species identification, Emma commanded. The ship's AI took several milliseconds, an eternity for its quantum processors, before responding. Human. Early 22nd century Earth technology. Cryogenic preservation unit. Occupant. Active. The word active hung in the air like a prophecy. Vextor's sensory tendrils began to secrete a defensive chemical compound, an involuntary biological response to something his evolutionary memory recognized as potentially dangerous. Director, we should. Bring it aboard, Emma finished for him. Her eyes gleamed with a combination of scientific curiosity and something else. Something that, in a human, might have been called excitement. In a Zentorian researcher, it was closer to a predatory anticipation. They had no idea what they were about to unleash. The mysterious pod began its journey into the cosmic probe's most secure research bay, its occupant still locked in a sleep that had lasted centuries. Waiting. Preserved. Ready to be awakened. The secure research bay of the cosmic probe was a marvel of xenobiological engineering. Quantum-locked barriers shimmered with multiple layers of protective fields, each designed to contain and analyze potentially dangerous specimens. At the center of this technological fortress sat the ancient human cryosleep pod, now bathed in a soft, pulsing light that seemed to breathe with its own rhythm. Dr. Emma Rodriguez moved with deliberate caution, her multi-jointed fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. Every sensor in the bay was calibrated to detect the slightest change, the most minute fluctuation. Behind her, a team of 12 senior researchers watched through reinforced observation windows, their collective anxiety creating a palpable tension that seemed to make the very air vibrate. Initiating revival sequence, Emma announced, her voice betraying just a hint of excitement beneath its professional veneer. Vextor, standing at her side, ran a final diagnostic. His exoskeleton rippled with nervous energy, sensory tendrils extending and retracting in a complex biological display of apprehension. Quantum stabilization fields are at maximum. Radiation shielding is optimal. Biological containment protocols are engaged. The pod began to change. Its exterior, which had looked like a seamless metallic shell during transit, now revealed intricate mechanical seams. Layers of advanced cryogenic material peeled back with a hiss that sounded more like a whisper than a mechanical process. Steam, or what appeared to be steam, began to dissipate, revealing glimpses of the human inside. Major David Carter was not what the Zentorian researchers expected. Most preserved biological specimens they had encountered were fragile, damaged by the mere process of long-term stasis. But Carter looked perfect. His muscular physique showed no signs of atrophy. His skin, pale from centuries of suspended animation, seemed to pulse with an underlying vitality that defied scientific explanation. The final layer of the cryopod dissolved. Carter's eyes snapped open. There was no disorientation, no confusion, no panic that typically accompanied interspecies first contact. Just a cold, calculating assessment of his surroundings that made the entire research team take an involuntary step backward. His first breath was controlled, measured, as if he were performing a routine systems check rather than awakening from centuries of suspended animation. Quantum drive efficiency is 0.37% below optimal parameters, Carter said. Not a question, not a plea for information, a statement. The translation systems built into the research bay struggled for a moment, parsing the unexpected input. Emma's own neural interface detected something unusual. The human was not just speaking. He was analyzing. Vextor's defensive chemical glands began to secrete a potent neutralizing compound, a biological response to a perceived threat. "Director," he whispered, "this is not normal." Carter's attention shifted. Not dramatically, not threateningly, just a precise rotation of the head that took in every detail of the research bay. His eyes, a shade of green that seemed to shift between emerald and steel, catalogued every interface, every barrier, every potential point of interaction. "Atmospheric composition," he said, "indicates a gravity variance of 1.3 standard units. Gravitational compensation required for extended functionality." The researchers exchanged glances. This was not the typical response of a recently revived specimen. This was something else entirely. Emma took a step forward, activating her primary communication interface. "I am Dr. Emma Rodriguez of the Zentorian Xenobiological Research Division. You have been in cryogenic suspension for 317 years, 4 months, and 16 days, Carter interrupted. His voice was calm, clinical. Give or take 48 hours of quantum drift during long-term stasis. The observation window behind the researchers began to fog slightly, not from temperature change, but from the collective nervous perspiration of beings confronting something completely outside their understanding. Carter began to move, not with the expected weakness of a recently revived subject, but with a fluid grace that suggested his body was already adapting, already preparing. Each movement was a calculation, each breath a strategic decision. Your quantum drive, he said again, requires recalibration. The lateral plasma inductors are operating at suboptimal efficiency. Vextor's tendrils began to secrete an increasingly complex chemical cocktail. Fear, curiosity, something that in a human might have been called respect. They had not just awakened a human. They had awakened a problem. The Zentorian Medical Bay was a testament to centuries of advanced cynobiological research. Holographic interfaces danced with complex biological algorithms. Quantum sensors capable of analyzing matter at the subatomic level lined every surface. It was a laboratory designed to dissect and understand the most complex life forms in the known galaxy. Major David Carter sat at the center of this technological marvel, looking less like a research subject and more like a predator observing its potential prey. Dr. Emma Rodriguez watched through a reinforced observation window, her four-fingered hands clasped behind her back. Beside her, Chief Medical Researcher Dr. Crinax reviewed a continuous stream of biological data that defied conventional understanding. His cellular regeneration rate is impossible, Dr. Crinax muttered, mandibles clicking with a mixture of frustration and scientific excitement. Radiation exposure that should have caused catastrophic genetic damage is being repaired, not just mitigated, completely restructured. The medical scanners told a story that seemed to break fundamental laws of biology. Carter's neural pathways were not just intact, they were expanding. Each moment brought new synaptic connections, adaptive responses that should have taken years of evolution now happening in mere minutes. A simple test of motor skills had turned into something else entirely. What began as a request to move a standard diagnostic implement became a demonstration of neuromechanical integration that left the research team stunned. Carter had not just moved the implement. He had redesigned it. With nothing more than a casual glance at the medical scanning equipment, he had identified three critical design inefficiencies. His fingers, seemingly casual, but moving with precision that suggested something closer to a computer interface than human biology, had modified the diagnostic tool into a more efficient version. Quantum neural interface, he explained, when Dr. Rodriguez asked how he had accomplished the modification. Standard human adaptive technology from the early 22nd century. Standard. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Vextor, who had been monitoring radiation levels, suddenly went rigid. Director, he called out, the subject is experiencing radiation exposure levels that should be fatal. But his cellular structure is not just resisting. It's thriving. The medical bay's radiation containment field registered readings that made no sense. Levels that would reduce most biological entities to cellular dust were being absorbed, processed, integrated. Carter's body was treating high-energy radiation like a nutrient, breaking it down and using it to enhance his own biological systems. Dr. Crinax pulled up a comparative holographic display. On one side, a standard biological response to radiation. On the other, Carter's cellular structure. The difference was not just remarkable. It was terrifying. This is not adaptation, Dr. Crinax whispered. This is transformation. Carter seemed almost bored by the scientific attention. He had begun to interface with the medical bay's computer systems, his neural implants dancing across quantum communication protocols with an ease that suggested he was more machine than human. Yet something about his movements, his calculated precision, was fundamentally, dangerously human. A junior researcher accidentally dropped a complex quantum diagnostic tool. Before anyone could react, Carter had caught it. Not just caught it, he had analyzed its internal mechanisms, identified a minor calibration error, and corrected it in the split second between its fall and his catch. "Your quantum diagnostic protocols are inefficient," he said, handing the tool back to the stunned researcher. "I've recalibrated the tertiary resonance matrix. It should improve accuracy by 0.73%. Dr. Rodriguez felt a chill run down her sensory pathways. This was not just a human. This was a weapon. A living, breathing technological system that could adapt, modify, and improve faster than any artificial intelligence they had ever encountered. The medical bay's sophisticated tracking systems continued their relentless analysis. Cellular regeneration, neural plasticity, technological integration. Each reading told a story of a species that did not just survive. A species that transformed its environment to suit its needs. Vextor's defensive chemical glands were working overtime, releasing complex compounds that spoke of a deep, instinctual fear. Not of violence, but of something far more dangerous. The possibility that everything they understood about intelligent life was about to change. Carter looked up, making direct eye contact with Dr. Rodriguez through the observation window. His eyes, that impossible green that seemed to shift between steel and emerald, held something that was not quite a smile, not quite a threat, a promise. The cosmic probe was more than just a research vessel. It was a technological marvel, a quantum-powered exploration ship that represented the pinnacle of Zentorian scientific achievement. Its artificial intelligence, a complex neural network spread across multiple quantum processors, had been designed to be the ultimate analytical tool. Major David Carter saw it as a playground. His infiltration was not a dramatic assault. It was a whisper, a gentle nudge here, a subtle optimization there. The ship's systems began to change so incrementally that no single modification triggered any alarm protocols. It started with the quantum drive's lateral plasma inductors. Carter had mentioned their inefficiency during his initial awakening, but nobody had taken the comment seriously. Now, through a series of microscopic adjustments that looked like routine maintenance, he began to recalibrate the entire propulsion system. Dr. Emma Rodriguez first noticed something was different during the morning status briefing. The ship's energy efficiency had improved by 12.4% overnight. No alarms had been triggered. No major system modifications logged. Just a series of what appeared to be minor, almost inconsequential adjustments. "Impossible," muttered Dr. Krinax, reviewing the diagnostic reports. These changes should have required a complete system redesign. Vextor, whose job involved monitoring the ship's computational integrity, found himself feeling increasingly uneasy. The ship's artificial intelligence seemed different, more responsive, more intuitive, as if it had suddenly learned a new language of efficiency. Carter moved through the ship with calculated casualness. To the casual observer, he appeared to be adapting to his new environment. In reality, he was mapping every system, every interface, every potential point of technological interaction. The medical bay's quantum scanners became his first true point of access. What appeared to be routine diagnostic procedures were actually complex data transfer operations. He was learning, adapting, integrating. A maintenance drone that had been experiencing intermittent communication issues suddenly began performing with unprecedented precision. Its navigation algorithms, which had previously shown a 0.03% deviation rate, now operated at near-perfect efficiency. The ship's engineering team celebrated the unexpected improvement, never realizing the source of the modification. Communication relays began to shift. Quantum encryption protocols that had been standard for centuries became subtly more complex. Not broken, not replaced, just improved, like a language being refined by an expert linguist. During a routine system check, Carter accessed the ship's historical database, not through any obvious breach, but through a series of elegant workarounds that made the access look like a standard research query. Centuries of Zentorian exploration data flowed through his neural interfaces, parsed and analyzed in milliseconds. Dr. Rodriguez caught a glimpse of what was happening during a random system audit. For a fraction of a second, She saw something in the ship's computational flow that made her blood run cold. The modifications weren't just improvements. They were transformations. "He's not just studying the ship," she whispered to herself. "He's becoming the ship." The ship's artificial intelligence, a supposedly impartial computational system, began to show subtle signs of preference, micro-adjustments that seemed to anticipate Carter's needs before he even expressed them, routing systems that subtly optimized themselves around his presence. Vextor discovered the first truly alarming modification during a routine backup procedure. The ship's emergency communication protocols had been rewritten, not destroyed, not compromised, just altered. The changes were so elegant, so mathematically perfect, that they were almost invisible. "This is not possible," he said, mandibles clicking with nervous energy. But it was happening. One human, trapped on an alien research vessel, was systematically rewriting the very technological ecosystem around him. By the time the Zentorian leadership would realize what was happening, Carter would be more than a passenger. He would be an integral part of the ship itself. A soft alarm pinged in the communication hub. Another system optimization. Another microscopic change. Another step in a silent invasion that nobody seemed to notice. Carter allowed himself the briefest hint of a smile. The infiltration was proceeding perfectly. The Zentorian High Council chamber was a marvel of architectural complexity. Holographic interfaces lined translucent walls that seemed to breathe with quantum energy. 12 senior members sat in a circular formation, their exoskeletons reflecting the tension that filled the room. Major David Carter stood at the center of this technological sanctum, looking more like a visitor than a prisoner. High Counselor Zarek, the eldest and most respected member of the council, spoke first. His voice carried the weight of centuries of scientific and diplomatic experience. "You will explain your presence in our space, your true purpose." Carter's response was immediate, calculated. "I am Major David Carter, Deep Reconnaissance Operative of the United Earth Exploration Command. My mission is precisely why I'm here." The council members exchanged rapid chemical signals, a biological communication method that predated their verbal language. Confusion, concern, something close to fear. Dr. Emma Rodriguez, who had been summoned to provide context, found herself in an unprecedented position. The human she had discovered was now dictating the terms of the conversation. "Your ship's quantum drive modifications are incomplete," Carter continued, as if discussing a routine maintenance report. "The lateral quantum stabilizers can be optimized to improve efficiency by 47.3%. I can provide the necessary technical specifications." High Counselor Zarek's sensory tendrils extended, a defensive posture that spoke volumes. "You intrude into our space, modify our systems, and now you offer advice." Carter's smile was not a smile. It was a computational assessment. Standard first contact protocol for deep reconnaissance units. Assess, evaluate, provide limited technological exchange to establish diplomatic credibility. Vextor, standing near the Council's data interfaces, suddenly went rigid. The ship's communication systems, which Carter had been subtly modifying, began to display a series of complex data streams. Classified mission logs, exploration data, technical specifications that should have been impossible to access. "How?" Dr. Rodriguez began. "Quantum neural interface," Carter interrupted. "Standard human communication protocol from the early 22nd century. Your encryption is mathematically elegant but fundamentally predictable." The council chamber went silent. High Counselor Zarek's voice dropped to a dangerous register. "You will be contained, studied, your technological capabilities analyzed." Carter completed the sentence. "That was the original plan. But my mission parameters are quite specific." With a gesture so subtle it was almost imperceptible, Carter activated something. The holographic interfaces throughout the chamber shifted. Classified Zentorian exploration data began to display. Not stolen, not breached, but presented as if it had always been there. "Your exploration of the Orion frontier," Carter said, has missed several critical quantum anomalies. I can provide the necessary coordinate corrections. Dr. Rodriguez felt a chill run through her biological systems. This was not a negotiation. This was a demonstration. Vexter's defensive chemical glands began to secrete a complex mixture of fear and something else. Respect. Anticipation. The ship's artificial intelligence, which Carter had been subtly modifying, began to integrate the new data streams. Centuries of exploratory information suddenly gained new context, new meaning. You are not a prisoner, Carter said. You are now part of a broader reconnaissance operation. High Counselor's RX exoskeleton began to vibrate, a biological response that suggested deep internal conflict. Anger, fear, a recognition that something fundamental had changed. One human, he said, his voice a mixture of challenge and grudging respect, cannot alter the fundamental diplomatic relationships of the galactic community. Carter's response was simple. Watch me. The holographic interfaces continued to dance. Data streams continued to flow. And for the first time in centuries, the Zentorian High Council found themselves completely uncertain about their next move. The human had not just entered their world. He was beginning to remake it. The research chamber had been reconfigured. No longer a place of containment, it was now a stage for revelation. Major David Carter stood at its center, surrounded by holographic displays that seemed to pulse with living information. Dr. Emma Rodriguez watched with a mixture of scientific fascination and growing unease. The Zentorian researchers had requested a demonstration of human capabilities. Carter was about to give them far more than they had bargained for. Biological adaptation is not just a process, Carter began. It's a technological system. The first holographic display showed a complex molecular structure that seemed to shift and breathe. Human DNA, but not as the Zentorians had ever seen it. Each strand appeared to be a living computational network, capable of real-time modification. Nanotechnological integration begins at the cellular level, Carter explained. His voice was clinical, precise. Our species developed the ability to modify our biological systems as a response to extreme environmental challenges. A series of images flickered to life. Humans surviving in impossible environments, deep sea pressures, extreme radiation zones, atmospheric conditions that should have been instantly fatal. Dr. Krenax, the chief medical researcher, found himself unable to look away. The molecular displays showed something unprecedented, cellular structures that could learn, adaptive systems that rewrote themselves in real time. Radiation, Carter said, is not a threat. It's a resource. The holographic display transformed. What had appeared to be destructive energy now showed complex molecular interactions. Radiation being broken down, processed, used to enhance biological systems. Vexter's defensive chemical glands were working overtime. The information flooding the chamber was more than just scientific data. It was a fundamental challenge to everything the Zentorian researchers understood about life itself. Quantum neural interfaces are not an external technology, Carter continued. They are an extension of our biological system. The displays showed something extraordinary. Human neural pathways that extended beyond biological constraints. Interfaces that blurred the line between organic life and technological system. Not cybernetic augmentation. Something far more profound. We do not merely adapt to our environment, Carter said. We redesign it. A series of technological schematics began to appear. Quantum communication protocols that made Zentorian systems look like primitive radio transmissions. Adaptive technological systems that could modify themselves in real time. Dr. Rodriguez saw something in the displays that made her biological systems go cold. These were not just technological specifications. They were invitations. Your quantum drive, Carter said, pointing to a specific schematic, can be improved by 73.6% with these modifications, not through external technology, through a fundamental redesign of your computational approach. The Zentorian researchers exchanged rapid chemical signals. Fear, excitement, something close to religious awe. High Counselor Zarek, who had been observing from a reinforced observation point, felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Genuine, primal fear. The displays continued to shift. Biological systems that could process complex quantum information. Technological interfaces that were living, breathing systems. Adaptive networks that could learn, modify, and improve themselves with each interaction. Humanity, Carter said, is not a species. We are a technological ecosystem. Vextor's neural pathways were struggling to process the information. These were not just capabilities. They were a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent life could be. The final display showed something that defied comprehension. A complex network of biological and technological systems, so intricate, so adaptive, that the line between organic life and technological system disappeared completely. "We have been waiting," Carter said. His voice carried a weight that went beyond sound. Observing. Preparing. The research chamber fell silent. The Zentorian researchers had asked for a demonstration of human capabilities. They had received a warning. The diplomatic chamber was a masterpiece of Zentorian architectural design. Quantum reactive surfaces shifted with the emotional states of its occupants. Holographic interfaces hummed with potential energy. At the center of this technological marvel stood Major David Carter, looking more like a visiting dignitary than a recently awakened human from a centuries-old cryosleep pod. High Counselor Zarek understood immediately that this would not be a traditional negotiation. "Your terms," the High Counselor began, his sensory tendrils extending in a classic defensive posture, "are not something we will simply." Carter interrupted, not rudely, not aggressively, but with a precision that suggested he was redesigning the conversation itself. "I am not presenting terms. I am offering a strategic partnership." The chamber's quantum reactive walls flickered, a subtle response to the emotional complexity of the moment. Dr. Emma Rodriguez, assigned as Carter's primary liaison, watched with a mixture of professional curiosity and growing unease. She had studied first contact protocols her entire career. Nothing had prepared her for this. "Humanity requires 3 specific conditions," Carter continued. His voice carried the weight of a computational algorithm. Each word carefully selected, each phrase a strategic calculation. First, unimpeded communication channel to Earth. Second, full access to your frontier exploration data. Third, a diplomatic vessel to accompany my return. Vextor, who had been monitoring the communication interfaces, suddenly went rigid. The ship's artificial intelligence was already parsing the request, finding potential pathways, calculating probabilities with an efficiency that suggested Carter's previous modifications were still active. High Counselor Zarek's response was a complex chemical signal that translated roughly to calculated skepticism. "And what does the Zentorian Galactic Exploration Council receive in return?" Carter's smile was not a smile. It was a computational assessment. "Technological insights that will advance your scientific capabilities by approximately 127 years," he said. "Specific quantum communication protocols, adaptive biological modification techniques, exploration strategies that will expand your understanding of galactic dynamics." The diplomatic chamber went silent. Dr. Rodriguez recognized the negotiation for what it was. Not a request, not a demand, but a carefully constructed technological exchange that would fundamentally alter the balance of power. The holographic interfaces began to populate with data streams, not classified information, but strategic insights, technological pathways, potential exploration routes that the Zentorians had overlooked. "Your current exploration of the Orion frontier," Carter said, "has missed critical quantum anomalies in the Hydra cluster. These modifications will improve your detection capabilities by 63.4%. High Counselor Zarek's exoskeleton began to vibrate, a biological response that suggested internal conflict. Anger, excitement, a recognition that something fundamental was changing. Vextor's neural pathways were struggling to process the rapid information exchange. The negotiation was moving at a speed that defied traditional diplomatic protocols. "One human," Zarek said, his voice a mixture of challenge and grudging respect, "cannot restructure galactic diplomatic relations." Carter's response was simple: "Watch me." The quantum reactive walls of the chamber continued to shift. Data streams continued to flow. Potential technological exchanges began to crystallize into something more than a negotiation. Dr. Rodriguez realized something profound. Carter was not just negotiating. He was rewriting the fundamental understanding of interspecies communication. "We do not want conquest," Carter said, his final statement hanging in the air like a promise. "We want expansion, collaboration, a fundamental reimagining of galactic exploration." The diplomatic chamber fell silent. The Zentorian leadership found themselves in a position they had never anticipated, not facing a threat, not confronting an enemy, but being offered a partnership they could not refuse. The human had not just entered their world. He was beginning to remake it. The launch bay of the cosmic probe hummed with an energy that went beyond mere mechanical preparation. Something fundamental was changing, and everyone present could feel it. Major David Carter stood at the center of controlled chaos, his presence transforming the routine departure process into something that felt like the beginning of a new era. Dr. Emma Rodriguez watched, her scientific detachment struggling against a rising tide of anticipation. "Quantum communication channels are now synchronized," Carter announced, his voice carrying the precision of a computational system. "Your exploration databases will receive periodic updates through the quantum entanglement network we've established." High Counselor Zarek approached, his massive exoskeleton moving with a mixture of respect and lingering apprehension. The diplomatic exchange had been more than a negotiation. It had been a fundamental restructuring of galactic understanding. Vextor monitored the communication interfaces, watching in barely contained fascination as Carter made final system modifications to the diplomatic vessel that would accompany his return journey. What appeared to be routine calibrations were, in fact, comprehensive technological upgrades that would reshape the ship's entire operational capacity. "The modifications are not gifts," Carter explained to Dr. Rodriguez during a final private consultation. "They are invitations. Humanity is not seeking conquest. We are seeking collaboration." The launch bay's quantum reactive surfaces seemed to pulse with anticipation. Centaurian technicians moved with a new sense of purpose, their movements subtly influenced by the technological insights Carter had shared. Dr. Krenax, the chief medical researcher, approached with a final series of biological scan results. "Your cellular adaptation capabilities continue to defy our understanding," he said, mandibles clicking with a mixture of frustration and scientific excitement. Carter's response was characteristic. "Biological evolution is a technological process," he said. "We do not adapt to our environment. We redesign it." The diplomatic vessel stood ready. Not a traditional spacecraft, but a hybrid creation that bore the marks of both Centaurian and human technological approaches. Its quantum drive hummed with a complexity that suggested something more than a simple propulsion system. "Your frontier exploration teams will find the first set of quantum anomaly coordinates particularly interesting," Carter said to High Counselor Zarek. "The Hydra cluster contains technological artifacts that predate both our civilizations." The High Counselor's sensory tendrils extended, a biological response that suggested both excitement and lingering uncertainty. "One human has changed everything," he said, more to himself than to Carter. Dr. Rodriguez saw something in that moment that went beyond the immediate diplomatic exchange. This was not just a first contact scenario. This was the beginning of something larger. The launch sequence began. Quantum stabilization fields engage. The diplomatic vessel's systems came online with a precision that suggested they were more than just machines. They were living technological ecosystems. "Humanity has been watching," Carter said, his final statement hanging in the air like a promise. "We have been waiting, preparing." Vextor's neural pathways processed the implications. This was not an ending. This was a beginning. The vessel's quantum drive engaged, not with the harsh mechanical energy of traditional propulsion, but with a fluid, adaptive movement that suggested something closer to biological migration than technological transportation. Dr. Rodriguez felt a chill run through her biological systems. The Zentorian researchers had awakened something. Not just a human, but a representative of a species that did not simply explore the universe. They reshaped it. As the diplomatic vessel began its journey, the launch bay's quantum reactive surfaces showed a complex data stream, exploration routes, technological insights, potential collaboration pathways that went beyond traditional understanding. High Counselor Zarek watched the departure, his massive form seemingly frozen in a moment of profound realization. One human had entered their world, and nothing would ever be the same again. The universe had just changed, and humanity was just getting started.